Could you get comfortable and make sure you are comfortable? Because I'm going to ask that you listen. I'll open the door at the back to let some fresh air in. And I want to try and jam into the chair. And it's all yours, Mr. Seiter.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. First of all, I'm very happy to be here because I like to be with students. And I haven't been in a lot of the Year 7 classes yet, but I'm very happy to be here. And I'm a talker, okay? I'm a real talker. So if you want to ask me a question, please just ask the question, raise your hand, okay? But I'm a good talker, okay? And I probably talk too much. Anyway, your teachers asked me to come in and talk about parables, okay? Now, all of you would have some idea of what a parable is, don't you? Can someone just tell me, in very succinct language or very simple language, what do you think a parable is? Because you already know some things. What's a parable? Yes.
Like a short story.
Okay, it's a short story. Okay, exactly right. A parable is a short story. Yes. Something that's been passed down. Yes, both of those. Yes.
It has a spiritual or moral message.
It has a spiritual and moral message. Okay, very good. Those are the two important characteristics of a parable. It's a story, and it's got a spiritual or moral or a meaning. A spiritual, moral message or a meaning, okay? And really, that's all you need to know about a parable. Now, we can go into more details about a parable, but that's the basic thing. It's a story. Now, all of you love stories, don't you? Is there anyone in this room who doesn't like a story? I love stories. When I was in Papua New Guinea, one of the first things I did, I bought me a 1 gig hard drive. Okay? That's you know what a gig is, don't you?
Yeah.
It's 1,000 megabytes. All right? It's big. And the first thing I did was I went to my nephew and I got him to load up all sorts of movies because I knew when I went to Papua New Guinea, I would not be able to watch TV like we have here in Australia. So I could plug the hard drive into my computer and I could watch stories. Movies are nothing more than stories. I also like to read. In fact, I like to read stories and then I like to watch the stories. So, you guys go to movies, right? You guys like to watch, if you have All-Star, you might have Showtime or Movie Time or whatever you have. You like to go to the movies. You like to hear stories. You go on a holiday. You come back and you like to tell stories. You like to listen to stories. You like to know the gossip, right? There's no one in this room, including me, that doesn't like to know the gossip, what's happening. So, when we talk about Jesus and we talk about parables, we can't just take Jesus and throw him back 2,000 years. We got to make him relevant today. And see, that's where I think you guys are in a good place. When I was your age, it was the old times, and we were taught that parables weren't really stories. They were sort of stories, but they told exactly the way things are going to happen. And so, because you're intelligent people, when we read the Bible, and this is my Bible, and I'm not a Bible basher, but I reckon this is a good book. And I've taught this book because I used to be an old, what they call religious education coordinator. I used to be in charge of religious education here at the college a long time ago, before you were even born. But I like this book because this book says something to me, and it's got story. This book is, you know what Bible means, don't you? It comes from the Latin word biblia. How many of you take French? What is the French word for library? Okay, you don't know? I also speak Spanish, and Spanish is a romantic language. That means it comes from the Romans, it comes from Latin. In Spanish, the word for library is biblioteca. So what is a library? What is the Bible? A Bible is a library of stories. That's all this Bible is. It's a library of stories. All right? Stories for our life, okay? So you already said, what is a parable? A parable is a story that has a special meaning attached to it. Jesus spoke in parables. Now, but Jesus wasn't the only guy that spoke in parables. Have you ever heard of a guy called Aesop?
No.
No? Okay. Aesop. Now, when Mrs. Thompson asked me to come into this room, I quickly jumped on the internet and I looked up Aesop because I didn't have it right off on the tip of my tongue. So I quickly ran off a list of his parables or fables. How many people here have heard the story of the hare and the tortoise?
Yeah.
Is there anyone here who hasn't heard about the hare and the tortoise? The rabbit and the tortoise? Turtle? What's the fable about? What's the meaning of the fable? You got this rabbit and you got this turtle and they're having a race. What's the story about?
That the rabbit's fast, but the toilet's slow, so the end slow and steady wins the race.
Okay, slow and steady wins the race. Now, Aesop lived 600 years before Jesus. 600, can you imagine that? I'm 60. I can't imagine 600 years. I know 60. You're 12 or 13. You know that. But he lived 600 years before Jesus. That's older than Australia as a country, like federation. We're just 200 years, all right? So you follow me? So what I want you to know, first of all, don't think that Jesus was the only guy that told parables or stories. Aesop told, and one of his and here's a list, and I'll leave this. He told 650. A lot of the cartoons that I used to watch as a kid, and maybe you still watch maybe sometimes, they take from Aesop, his fables, okay, about the fox and all that. But they're all written here. Now, one thing Aesop did was he told him. I'm talking about Aesop. I'll get to Jesus. Don't worry. Aesop told his parables or fables using animals, but he was telling them to people. Why do you think Aesop would use animals when he was telling a story? Why do you think that? Yeah? Sorry?
More interesting.
More interesting, that's a possibility. Yeah?
So they can't even think to people.
So he can't, it's something to do with that, so he sort of can't relate to humans. Yeah?
So it's more understandable.
Could be more understandable. But it also, if Aesop would tell me, Dave, you're a little bit like the rabbit. He wouldn't say that. If somebody, yeah, go ahead. Exactly, it could offend them. So he used animals to get a message across so he wouldn't offend people. That's very good, excellent. For example, when I was a kid, if I was in class with my teacher and my teacher would say, you're always running around, you're always going zing, 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 zing. Slow down, slow down. I might get my feelings hurt. I might think the teacher's picking on me. I might think the teacher's having a go at me. And see, back in Aesop's time, he wanted to tell people, maybe slow and steady does win the race. Sometimes in your homework, if you try to get things done too fast, you make mistakes. Maybe you need to be less of a rabbit and more of a turtle, slow and steady. But if I call you up, if I say that to you, you might get your feelings hurt. And so Aesop tells a story to the people, and then he just leaves it. So he says, which one are you? You the rabbit or you the turtle? Which one are you? You the rabbit, you the turtle? You make up your own mind. See, when you tell a story, people use their imagination, which is fantastic. I can close my eyes now and I can see Star Wars. I love Star Wars. All right? I can close, and I know what happens in the 6 episodes. Okay? I close my eyes and I can see all sorts of stories, okay? So stories makes us use our imagination. Would you agree with that? Okay. So Jesus is no different. Jesus is no different. Now the thing is, and I know if I'm talking to Mrs. Thompson, you guys are studying like a lot. You studied Rome, right? And you're studying the life and times of Jesus for a use of a better word. All right. One thing you got to know about, I take for granted, I get really upset when I'm on the computer and I can't download something in 2 seconds. I get really upset. I like things now fast because of the internet. I'm spoiled. Back in Jesus' time, do you know not everyone read? You know that, don't you? In fact, the minority of people read. Only rich people probably read and went to school. If you were a normal person, you didn't go to school much and you didn't read. Why? You were too busy staying alive, as the song goes. You're too busy staying alive. You don't have time to read. So let's put this in the context of Jesus then, all right? When I was your age, I used to think that the Gospels, now you know what how many Gospels are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, how many?
6.
6? Bump, wrong, play again.
4.
4, okay. What are they?
Mark.
Mark,
John.
John, Matthew. You're missing one, starts with an L. I have a son by that name. Luke, okay. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the 4 Gospels. When I was your age, I used to think that there was a guy like sort of with a microphone that followed Jesus around and he was recording his words. And that's what we have in here. But that's not true. There are 3 levels. There are 3 levels in the gospel. The first level is what Jesus said. All right? What Jesus said. The second level is after Jesus died and went away, people told stories about Jesus. Why did they tell stories about Jesus? Yeah? They thought he was a great man. How did they? Yeah.
Like some people thought he was a god or something.
Thought he was a god.
He had good morals to pass
He had
on.
good morals. They told stories though too, because there was no book club. There wasn't this thing. Nothing was written down. Nothing. So, how are you going to remember? And there's no electricity here, guys. There's no electricity. There's no books. There's no photocopier. There's no phones. There's none of the stuff that we have. So So you tell people about Jesus. But how do you tell? How do you get people to remember about Jesus? You tell stories. Because why? Everyone loves a story. So you tell stories about Jesus. And then you remember them. But you know the funny thing is, I tell you a story, then you turn around and tell her a story, but you sort of forget the exact way I told it, right? And you tell it according to your personality. And then you tell it to her, and then she tells someone else to her personality. The story changes, and that's all right. And that's why we have some stories in here about Jesus that are very similar, but a little bit different. You follow me? So Jesus lived for 30 years. He was dead. He rose. He went off to heaven or wherever he went to. That doesn't bother me. And then you have people for about 30 years talking about Jesus. And then someone said, we better write these stuff down. Why? Why do we need to write stories down?
So that they're remembered forever.
Exactly. So we don't forget them. Good stuff. We write the stories down. It's like if you go into an indigenous community or an aboriginal community or even Papua New Guinea where I was at, you make sure that you write the story down or that you pass the story on, because if you don't pass the story on and I die, what happens to the story? It dies with me. If I don't pass the story on, that's why if you got grandparents that came from another country, you know what you ought to do? You ought to talk to your grandparents of what it was like in England, or what it was like in Poland, or what was it like in Italy. Because if they don't tell you and they die one day, which they will, you may never get the story. And you miss out on that good gossip, that good story. You miss out on that. And you'll be so much richer for that. All right? Okay. So, why did Jesus tell stories? He told stories because he respected people. Okay? If I ask you a question, if I ask a question, who is my neighbor? You may say, oh, no sweat. Jack and Jill live right over here next to me, and then David and Harry live over here, and Mary lives here and here. So one time, so we know who our neighbors are, okay? Like I know who my neighbors are. But I'm going to read you a story now, and you know this story. You know the story. I have to put my glasses on because I'm getting old. I'm going to read the story. Jesus told this story in answer to a question. Now, am I making sense? You following me? Yeah. You'll tell me if you don't understand, right? Yeah. All right? And you'll ask questions too, won't you? Because if not, I can just talk until you all fall asleep, okay? You can laugh at those things too. You know. Okay, never mind. Anyway, this is a parable. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, listen to the introduction. All right? Listen to the introduction. Just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. So there's people that they're trying to trick Jesus, all right? This guy's a bit of a smart aleck in class, all right? So he wants to see if the teacher knows what he's talking about. So this lawyer. Now we know lawyers are very smart. They're no different in Jesus' time. Just then a lawyer stood up to Jesus. And he said, Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? What do I have to do to get to heaven? He said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? And he answered, you should love your Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and you should love your neighbor as yourself. So those are Jesus' basic 2 commandments. Forget the 10 commandments. You follow those 2, you don't have to worry about anything. All right? You have to love God with your whole heart, mind, and soul, and you love your neighbor as yourself. And then listen to what the lawyer says. This is classic. And he said to him, you have given your answer. You have given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But then the lawyer says, but wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? All right? So, do you get the scene? Jesus is in a situation like this. He's teaching people. And this one person stands up and says, what must I do to get to heaven? And Jesus says, you got to do this. And the lawyer says, I've done that. And then he says, but who is my neighbor? So Jesus does not say, he's your neighbor, he's your neighbor, he's your neighbor. So what's Jesus going to do, people? What's he going to do? He's going to tell us, he's going to tell a story. He's going to tell a story about what? Who is my neighbor? So that's the purpose of the parable. So when you listen to this parable, you've got to say, who, he's answering the question, who is my neighbor? You got me? Okay? You sure? So what's the story about? Who is my neighbor? What's the story about? Who? Not neighbors, that's a TV show. Who is my neighbor? Okay. Who is my neighbor? All right, listen now. I just lost the page. No, I didn't. I think I did. Here we go. So, but wanting to justify himself, he asked, and who is my neighbor? Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. So here's a guy beaten up. Here's a priest. He walks by. Looks at him, snubs his nose, walks by. You got the picture? You got an image in your head? Use your imagination. Use your imagination. All right. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on by the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend. In the story. And then Jesus turns to the lawyer, and what's he going to ask? What's Jesus going to ask the lawyer? Remember what the story is about. The story is about... Okay. He's not going to ask exactly who is your neighbor, but he's going to say something like that. What's he going to say to the lawyer? Which of the 3 was neighbor to the person? So Jesus asked him the question. He told the story. Which one do you think was the neighbor?
The second one.
The Samaritan. Okay? So that's exactly what the lawyer says. He says, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? He said, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, what do you think Jesus said to the lawyer now? Sorry, no, he didn't. He's already told him who his neighbor is. He's already told him who his neighbor is. He's told the story. I'll repeat it again. Listen now, and think about this. It's not easy. He's told the story. So there's 3 guys. Tell me the 3 guys. Starts with a P.
Samaritan,
Priest. Next one starts with an L. Levi. Not the pants, but he belonged to a tribe. Levite. And the 3rd guy was a Samaritan. And Mrs. Thompson, she's told you about Samaritans, and so has Hannah about that. Okay? And then Jesus says, which one in your opinion is the neighbor to the Samaritan? And the lawyer says, the one that showed him mercy. And then Jesus said to him, go. You finish the sentence. Nope. Don't. Play again. Good try.
be like the Samaritan.
Exactly. Go and do likewise. That's the punchline. That's the hit in the guts. Because the lawyer is feeling pretty good. He's rich. He's intelligent. He's got everything he needs, and he wants to find out how to get to heaven. Jesus told him, this is what you do. He said, I've done that. And then he says, but who's my neighbor? And Jesus doesn't say, well, your neighbor is Samaritan. Your neighbor is this guy. Your neighbor is this guy. He tells a story. And then at the end, Jesus says, just to see if he gets it, who's my neighbor? And the guy says, the guy who did mercy. The lawyer said, the guy that did mercy. Then he says, go and do likewise. See, that's the great thing I like about Jesus. He doesn't insult your intelligence. You know, if you look at this Bible, there's almost no place in there that Jesus tells you what to do. He doesn't point a finger at you and tell you what to do. He tells you a lot of stories. He gives you a lot of images. And he invites you, because you're smart, because you're a good person already, he invites you to make the conclusions. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, in that story, I was talking to Mrs. Thompson, in that story, there's some characteristics to that story. You can look at a parable, a big parable like that. How many people like to tell jokes in here? Clean jokes.
Come on, Oscar.
Okay, you like to tell jokes. Okay, apparently, Oscar. So sometimes when you tell a joke, I'm not very good at joke telling, I must admit that. But I know you listen to a lot of jokes, or you see a comedian on the television. And usually, how many people are involved in a joke? A lot of people. Give me a number. 3, exactly. Exactly. Most jokes have 3 people involved. Why? Because 3 is what? It's easy to remember. Because if you want to, you go to Las Vegas when you're an adult, and you go to a club and you listen to a comedian. You don't go in there with a piece of paper and write down the jokes. You listen. And then you like to remember and go tell them to somebody else. If I'm going to listen to your joke, I'm not going to say, wait a minute, can you repeat that again? No. You're going to tell me the joke so I can remember it. And one easy way to remember it is you got 3 people. There was a priest, a rabbi, and a minister went into a bar. Okay? And if you look at even TV commercials, there's a lot of 3. So in a lot of Jesus' big parables, there are 3 people. So in this parable, there was how many people? 3. There was the
Samaritan.
Levite, priest, and Samaritan. Now, another thing, if I was going to be with you longer, I would explain to you the significance of Jesus using a priest. And I would explain to you the significance of using a Levite, and I'll tell you why. The priest thought the guy was dead. See, when you were a Jewish priest, and you were going to be the priest in the temple, you could not touch a dead body, because that would make you spiritually unclean, and it would not allow you to go to the temple to do your thing, to do your service. If you were a priest back in the time of Jesus, you were 1 week a priest. 1 week out of 52, you had to go to the temple and you had to offer sacrifices. On the end of that, you went home. And notice the story was told he was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. So the priest had already finished his yearly work. See, Jesus' people would have known this. See, and so the more you understand about the life and times of Jesus, the more you can understand this parable. The priest had finished his work, and so it didn't matter if he touched the dead person because he wasn't going to Jerusalem, he was going home. He was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He was going away from Jerusalem, and Jerusalem was the only place they had the temple. So the priest should have known better. You know, it's like today, if a doctor walks by, no, the doctor should stop and help. Secondly, the second person, a Levite. A Levite was from the tribe where priests came from. He didn't want to touch. He thought the guy was dead. You know? So he didn't want to touch him to become unclean. Then you got this guy that's a Samaritan, and the Jews thought the Samaritan was the lowest of the low. They would probably, a Jew back in those days would have said, the only good Samaritan is a dead Samaritan. All right? I'm sorry to tell you that, but they did not like him. They hated him. So, see, Jesus then turns the world upside down, doesn't he? So who is the good guy? The good guy is the guy that's despised, the guy that's hated, the guy that would be better dead than alive. So Jesus then is also saying something on many different levels. Not only who is my neighbor, but what should we be doing about prejudice, about racism, and everything like that. You following me? So this parable is pretty significant. So you have those three people. So a big parable has three people. Another thing, it has the contrast. You know what a contrast is? Like black and white's a contrast, hot and cold's a contrast. What's the contrast in the story? I'll quit talking in a minute. Don't go to sleep. Wake up. Okay, it's after lunch. What's the contrast in the story?
Good and bad.
Good and bad.
Exactly. The priests, who were the good guys, should have stopped, but the bad guys stopped. That's the contrast. That's the contrast. That's what threatens you. And you've got to ask yourself the question right now, in 2012, if this happened, who are you? Are you the priest? Are you the Levite? Are you the Samaritan? What decision are you going to make? And you can make that out here in the yard. This parable could be out here in CCW. So what are you going to do? Are you going to be priest, Levite, or Samaritan? You have a choice. Which one are you going to be? And do you see this guy as your neighbor? See, that brings it on home, doesn't it, a little bit more? Another one is, so you have the three people, you have the contrast, and then you have the repetition. The repetition is just for us to remember. Walk by, stop. Okay? Priest walk by, Levite walk by, Samaritan walk by, stop, helps. So that's repetition. Okay? And then the last thing is the punchline, the moral to the story. All right? So that's real fast about big parables. But then there's all sorts of small parables. And but you can't apply those four rules to all parables. All right? Fair enough? So those are for big parables. And there's a lot of big parables. Okay? There's a parable of the people that had the gifts and talents, the three gifts. Okay? Like one person was given 10 coins, another person 5 coins, another person 1 coin, and the master went away and said, "What are you going to do with the money I gave you?" When he comes back, the guy who had 10 made another 10. The guy who made 5 made another 5. The guy who had 1, what did he do with it? You remember the story? He said, "Ooh, I'm a bit nervous. I might lose it, so I'm going to bury it." So he went out in the backyard and buried it. And so when the master came back, he gave him back the 1 and says, "Here's your 1 back." And the master got all upset. He said, "You're lazy." And he took away the 1 and gave it to the guy with the 20. The moral of the story is, what do you do with your gifts and talents? Are you like the guy with the 10? Like all of you are smart, intelligent people. Do you develop your talents? Are you like the guy with the 10 and made another 10? Are you the guy with the 5, made another 5? Are you the guy that was so afraid to be intelligent and smart and doing all these things that you then buried your talents? Which one are you? Now that's another big parable. But there's a short parable. I'll tell you the short parable. I'll read this and then I'll finish, because I'll probably put you to sleep. Anyway, you should read chapter 15 of Luke. It's a great story, and it's 3 parables. It's a parable of the lost sheep, the parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the prodigal who? Son or daughter. Okay, here we go. So Jesus told them this parable. Now I want you to tell me the meaning of this, all right? You don't have to listen much anymore. Just have a listen. But I'm going to ask someone. One of you are going to have to tell me the meaning of this. Okay, which one of you, having 100 sheep and losing one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he finds it, he lays it on his shoulders and rejoices. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, "Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost." Okay, that's a parable. A guy's got 100 sheep. 99 are nice little obedient sheep. One sheep wanders off. And what does the shepherd do? Yeah, he goes after it and gets it. And then he brings it back and throws a big party. Right? If you're a shepherd, what would you do? You've got 100 sheep. 99 go off. 99 stay in the paddock. One of them squeaks through the barbed wire fence and goes off. What would you do? Forget it. Who said that? Good on you. That's the right answer. That's probably what we do. We probably say, "I'll cut my losses," right? Wouldn't you? And I said, "I'm not going to leave the 99. So, well, bad luck. The wolves can have that one. The wolves can have that one. Because, see, back in those days, there's no fences. There's no fences. They're just open paddocks. Okay? So what does a shepherd do? He does something that is economical. Doesn't make sense, does he? Economically, would you agree with that? Yeah, economically it doesn't make sense. Would you leave your 99 sheep and go off and look for the one? No, you say, "I still got 99. I'll keep the 99. Bad luck on that one. Hope he's all right, but tough love." So what's the meaning of that parable? What's the meaning of that parable? Sorry? Oh, you say, who's, okay. We're sheep.
And Jesus is the shepherd.
Okay, Jesus is the shepherd.
Be grateful for what you have.
Be grateful for what you have, possibly. Possibly. Yeah.
Don't be lazy, go get the other sheep.
Don't be lazy, get the other sheep. Maybe. I still think we can get a little better one. Yep.
Nothing's too insignificant.
Nothing's too exciting. You're getting on better on the track. You're better on the track. All those are good answers, but better on the track. You're coming good. Yep.
All for one, one for all.
All for all, one for all. Yeah, that's a nice expression, but I don't know if it's exactly what we mean here, but that's good. Yeah. Somebody else that had the hand up? No? What does it say about forgiveness? Not much? Oh, I think it says a lot. If you put it in the context of being lost, of going away from the group, of turning your back on maybe the 99 and going your own way, yeah?
Everybody needs a second chance.
Everybody needs,
Second chance.
exactly, that's good. Everybody needs a second chance, yeah? Look, in one sense, there's no right or wrong answer to a parable, because you have to figure it out yourself. But what I take from that parable is Jesus or God, or I could be the shepherd, or you could be the shepherd, but someone somehow ran away. Maybe in your peer group, somebody's run away. Do you accept them back? Do you go get them and bring them back? So to me, it's a sign of reconciliation, stuff like that. Because back in those days, you wouldn't leave the 99 because there was only one shepherd. Does that make sense? So actually, Jesus is saying everything shouldn't be judged on money. Some things are more important than money. Maybe the individual is more important than money. Okay.
Thank you.